Okay, so first thing I have to do is remove anything that's lying around, because you don't want that flying everywhere. I'll pull this out as well, just saves you accidentally pressing it when you're taking it out. And then the first thing we have to do is remove the gear knob and the gaiter. Now on standard ones, these are separate items. Being that this is a John Cooper Works carbon knob, it is actually tie wrapped to the gaiter. So the first step we're going to do is just pop up the gaiter, quick pull up on the frame, not on the gaiter. That pops it up, and then we've got to give a really big tug on the knob, and you've got to be careful because it will come up very fast and you don't want to hit yourself in the face with it. So let's just position myself above it so my chest is above it and give it a pull. Oh, that came off easily. Okay, and then that just comes off. We can put that to one side. Now we need to actually remove this lower part of the console area. It's fairly straightforward. There's 4 screws that hold this in, 4 screws that hold in the uprights, and then they just pop straight out. So to do that, we're going to need, if I can reach down here, a T40 sort of screwdriver bit. I've also got a little helping knob bit which makes it easier, especially for this one up here, because it's quite difficult to get to. And then a Phillips screwdriver and some trim removal tool. If you haven't got the right tool, a screwdriver with a bit of tape on it, it's only for this binnacle part down here, and you just don't want to obviously scratch the plastic up. Okay, so this is the first bit that we remove. What we've got to do is, once you've got it, once you hear it click as it pops up, you can then just pull it up. It'll have some connectors on the back, depending on the switches you've got, depending on how many connectors. As far as I'm aware, they are all completely unique. They can't go into the wrong places. So we'll just pull these out. The middle 2 just pull out. The outer 2 have a small catch on them here. So there's a catch in here which you either can get your fingernail in or a little screwdriver tool, and you literally just want to push that in while popping it out, and that one comes out. And then you've got the same on this side. Which isn't going to come out. Come on. There we go. Okay, so now we can put that to one side as well. Okay, so now we need to remove the 4 Phillips screws that hold this console in. There's 2 down here just underneath the switch panel that we just removed, and there's 2 inside the cup holders. So now that they're out, this whole console is now loose. Mine is a little bit more complicated because I do have the sunglasses slot underneath there, which does overlap on the very end of the console, but you don't need to remove that. It will come out. It just takes a little bit more wiggling. So the next step we need to do is to loosen off the 4 Torx screws that hold in the uprights. It's a T40, I believe. Yeah, T40. You can access the top one on the left by dropping the glove box down. And the top one on the right here, you might just be able to get into it, especially if it's a pre-facelift. On a facelift one, you will probably have to pull this panel down. This panel here, normally you can just get your finger in and it will just pull down. And then when you finish, you can just push it back up and it will clip back in its place. Okay, so we're just going to remove these two Torx on this side. Now the top one, there's not a lot of room between the steering wheel column and the actual upright, so I have like a little thumb tool. You can do it with like a normal Allen style sort of L-shaped Torx. It just takes a bit longer because obviously you can only do quarter of a turn or so at a time. Okay, once you've got those out, you'll now notice that it's all now loose. So we need to, on a pre-facelift, you can just pull these tubes out and up. On a facelift, you can't because they go underneath the edge of the dash panel here. So all you do is you lift up this, make sure these cables are going through the big hole there. And then underneath you'll now see there's bits of foam. If you bring these forward, you can drop the foam out and the upright's out through the top. So foam out, or you can take the whole upright and the foam out in one go. Underneath there is the cigarette lighter socket cables. There's two connections, one for the power and ground and one for the illumination. They just pull out. And again, they are keyed, so they'll only go in one place in one direction. Okay, so that's the removal done. Now we can actually go and fit the shift gaiter cover onto here and then go through the installation process. Okay, so now we come to the installation part. We've got the console we've removed out of the car, and we've got the package that you should receive like this. So the first thing we obviously need to do is open it up. You do need to be careful because obviously there is acrylic inside here. A knife will slice it, but if you're careful you shouldn't need to cut into it. And then once you open it up, you'll see the various components within there. We've got actually the shift cover itself, a slide plate which goes underneath it, the tension spring that keeps the slide plate up against the actual cover, and we've also got two plastic collets, and I'll cover what you need those for in a second. So let's put the package to one side. Okay, so if we flip the console over, inside you'll see there are 4 holes where normally the gaiter cover, the gaiter surround would click into. That's what we use to secure this. So we'll put the slide plate and the spring and the other plastic bits to one side for the minute. Underneath on the cover you'll see there are 4 Allen head countersunk screws. We just remove those. And now we want to put it in. You'll notice obviously you've got the design. If it has an engraving on there, it has to be a certain way up, but on the back piece you'll also see that there is a Watergeek Designs logo engraved on there. That goes to the front of the car. So as you look at the console here, you've got the cup holders, the hole for the cigarette lighter socket. So that's where the Watergeek Designs logo points to. All we do is line it up and then put the screws in. In terms of tightness, you want it snug, but it really doesn't need to be mega tight. If you over tighten it, you will break the brass inserts free of the plastic, so don't over tighten it. Okay, so now it's all ready to be installed into the car. These two plastic pieces, these fit over the top of the spring and help locate it within the slide plate. There's two of them. The reason being is if you have an unmodified gear stick, it has like a plastic moulding on there. You will need the one with the larger of the two holes. If I put them side by side, you'll see that one has a larger hole than the other. That one will go over the collar. Alternatively, you can carefully cut off that plastic moulding, and then you can use the smaller one. That's actually how my one is, and it does improve the look of the actual stick itself, but obviously not everyone wants to do that, so you have a choice. So I will put on the one with the smaller hole. That just pushes onto the spring. And then the order of installation is the spring and the plastic retainer goes on the gear stick, the slide plate goes on, and then the console itself goes on. Okay, so we're back in the car, ready to install the whole console with the shift cover. First things to put in are the spring, which should come supplied with a sort of like a plastic cover on the end of it. That has to stay on there. It's just to stop the spring popping up past the shift plate. These have to go on first. Okay, you can't get them on afterwards. So first thing, I would personally put the the slide plate onto the little plastic piece. You'll see it's actually got like a little lip on there which sits in perfectly into the hole. And we put that on. Now we're ready to put the console on. So what I tend to do is plug in the accessory socket first, because as you start putting it in, the room you have at the front of it is minimal. Okay, right, so you then need to put the foam pieces in. You'll notice they've got like a thinner front than the rear. That bit goes to the back of the car, so faces you. Let's put this in first. Phone goes on there. And we'll slide this one from the bottom. Now it's just a case of wriggling it home. As I said earlier, this one's harder because it's got the sunglasses slot in there, so it does overhang the front. So I'm just going to lift that up a little bit while I push this back in, just to get the front edge over, and now I can start pushing this home. The other thing to make sure is the cables for the wind mirrors and heated seats, if you've got them, also come up through this hole before we screw it down. So we've got one, two, there should be another one here somewhere. There we go. Okay, so now we've got that in, it's now just a case of making sure that all the screw holes are lined up, and then put those Phillips screws back in. Now again, it's not a structural piece, so it needs to be tight so it doesn't rattle around. but not too tight. If you over tighten it, you'll just strip the threads because it only screws into plastic underneath. Okay, now I will put in the 4 Torx screws that hold the uprights in place. Again, they need to be tight enough to hold the trim in place to stop it rattling, but if you over tighten them, you'll strip the thread. Okay, and then this panel can just be pushed back up and clip back into place. And then finally put the switches back in. As I said earlier, these are all keyed, so they'll only go into one place in one direction, so you can't get it wrong. And then what you do now, okay, so we've got that pushed back in. Okay, so now all that's in, the last thing to do is fit the gear knob. I'm actually changing mine to a metal one. You can refit the original one. Okay, and there we go.